welcome to the Tyre Recycling Podcast. We're here today with episode 39, and it's a very big episode because we have seen a lot of developments in relation to the potential CrumbRubber ban. Ewan, obviously I've just alluded to what we are going through today. Could you give us a little bit more detail about this episode?
The background to the CrumbRubber issue is that there have always been questions about the toxicity of CrumbRubber, and the argument has always been emotional because there's no proven link that there are connected issues. In fact, there have been several tests done, medical tests done, that show that there are no issues. And for some time, the European Chemicals Agency Risk Assessment Committee looked at banning CrumbRubber on the basis of its PAH content and the toxins that it releases. However, the European Commission decided rather than ban CrumbRubber on that basis, they would tighten the restrictions on the pH that could be released from CrumbRubber, or the content, the pH content in CrumbRubber, which is less of an issue because the tyre manufacturers themselves have been reducing the pH content of the tyres. So, if anything, pH becomes a legacy issue. So, that issue out of the way, the industry thought things had settled down. But then the microplastics challenge came along, where the issue of microplastics arriving in seafood and the ocean gave rise to concerns about, what are we doing? Now, initially we thought microplastics, we're talking about small granules, the sort of thing that would be added to hand cleanser or facial creams and so on. But the ECHA RAC extended the coverage of intentionally added microplastics to up to 5 millimeters. That brought CrumbRubber Infill into the equation. So there were arguments backwards and forwards. And in the summer, most recently on the 23rd of September, the ECHA RAC agreed a proposal to put before the European Commission. That document has now been sent out to various member states for discussion and approval. And when it comes back to the European Commission, they will have a vote on whether to implement it or not. If they implement it, it will ultimately put 400,000 tonnes of tyres annually back on the market. Now, it's almost, we'll find out during the discussion, but that in curing what they think is a problem, it will create another problem. And today we're speaking to Poul Steen Rasmussen, who is the CEO of Genan and the chair of EuRIC's Mechanical Recovery Mechanical Tyre Recovery Group, about the issue. To see what the head of one of the largest granulation firms in the world has to say about the CrumbRubber Infill ban.
Okay, I'm sure I have an inkling. Well, we obviously recorded this interview yesterday, but I'm sure people who are familiar with the tyre recycling sector will have an inkling as to what Paul's feeling will be towards this situation. But let's have a look at what he has to say, and on the issue. And so let's get stuck into that interview right now.
As the chair of the mechanical recovery side of EuRIC. Perhaps you can explain to us the impact that potential CrumbRubber ban would have.
Well, first of all, what it will mean if it comes to effect, as is suggested by the Commission now, we are talking about something that might happen in 8 years from now. So when that eventually will hit the industry, of course, it will have a major impact, because it is so that the major application of mechanical recycled tires today are going into infill. And therefore, it will have a huge impact on the possibilities of finding applications for that particular product. I used to say so that when journalists are asking me, so what will happen to GIN? And I normally would say, and I'll say the same thing here, we will survive, we'll get on, we'll have less material to recycle because we will have to find new applications. I'm more worried about the environment in this, because there will be 500,000 tons of of tires having to find a new application. And as it looks right now, there doesn't seem to be any other applications than to incinerate it or export it. And and as things look now, with the restrictions on waste transport as well, which is one regulation that's on its way in Europe as well, those tires will have to stay in Europe, and then we'll have to find a solution to that problem. So for the industry, it will have a major impact, but it will be a much, I think, stronger impact on the environment if we go along the way that's suggested now.
Yeah, I think the environmental issues, the sort of unintended consequences of the potential CrumbRubber infill ban, and without a restriction on exports, it could create all sorts of issues, particularly if there's a glut of stock in the market, and the Indian importers in particular start charging for taking the tires rather than paying us to take the tires. That opens up all sorts of wormholes that we really don't want to go down. Where tires have a value on or scrap tires have a value in the international market, and people will come in from all over the world where there are no regulations, and they'll say, well, we can make money just by taking their tires and not do anything with them. So that's one sort of long-term consequence. But in Europe, how can Europe see a way forward if it has not invested in the domestic recycling sector?
Well, before answering that question, I just want to stress that I mean, what the Commission is suggesting on unintentionally placed microplastic, we think is a good idea, and we do not suggest to continue as has been the case in the past. You know, the fact of using infill in football pitches without making any retention measures around the pitches is not a good idea. It really is not, and for that reason, it has been taken initiative in industry over the last few years to establish fields where you have these retention measures installed, and there you can see that the reduction in then of the material that will escape such a field is so little that you can say that is it really worthwhile to take the consequences when you put into priority of what that would be of banning it. And it seems as if that option has been ignored by the Commission. And that's why I'm saying it's a bad thing for the environment, because the way it's suggested now, we can continue, or people can continue to put microplastic or infill on football pitches without any retention measures for the next 18 years or 16 to 18 years, depending on how long it will take before it's being passed through the Parliament. Because as it is now, you can continue to buy infill without any retention measures, without any restrictions, put them on fields, let the material disappear. And then after the 6 years, you can still put material on the fields, you know, to the reuse of material. We just cannot sell it to them, but they can buy 20 tons and store it in the warehouse and continue to put it on the fields. And I think that is a shame. I think we should be going another direction, to be more strict on making retention measures, making sure that this material stays into a closed circle, And all indications are that works very efficiently. And then put that into place quicker than 6 years, but then maybe have a longer period where you assess it. Because if it ends up like we think, and a lot of experts also agree, that the escape of material from such a field with the right retention measure, even described in the standard in EU, then that is insignificant. And is it then a good idea to ban a very good circular economy when we are all shouting for such things? It seems very frustrating to understand what the point is when your consequences are so minor. If we did the retention measures, but it seems as if there is a political will to show some, action. And I just think it is a shame for the environment. I think we could do a lot better.
Yeah, I think the retention measures you're talking about are similar to the ones we saw in the Swedish research, where field operators have been told that they would need to refresh the 2.5 tons of CrumbRubber every year. And when a control test was carried out with proper retention measures in place, I think SDAB came up with a figure of 2.5, 3.5 kilos lost per year, which is, as you say, negligible.
It's well beyond it. It's well, within the limit that was suggested by the authorities at one stage, with the 7 grams per square meter. So it just seems as if it hasn't ring a bell in the commission or in the political system. And I just think it's a shame for the environment. I think we have a very good circular economy here. We're taking care of tires that are already produced. And we find a good way of using it for another 10 years. But of course, we should do it better. We don't want to solve one problem by creating another one. That's why we're suggesting the retention measures. They seem to be very efficient. Maybe we should have time to prove that. We have one pitch done in Denmark now in cooperation with the Danish Football Associations. There's one in Spain. There's investigation done in Norway, the one you refer it to in Sweden. And of course, it takes time to prove the effectiveness of this. But I think that time should be given to show that we here have a very good circular economy, especially, as we talked about in the beginning, that we have these shipment regulations coming up on waste, where Europe, with very good rights and underneath the Green Deal, would like to keep the waste in Europe. It's a resource. It's the future mining industry we're talking about. And then that would mean that all the tires will stay in Europe. Now, today, a lot of the tires are escaping the borders and going to Turkey or Northern Africa and being incinerated under horrible circumstances. But now we want to stop that in Europe, and I think that makes good sense. But we can't then do it at the same time cut all the applications, or many of them, especially the biggest one, if we want to have mechanical recycling going on. So I just, that's my feeling, is that we have good intentions here, but I think very strong arguments have been ignored. And we have been in this for the last 3 or 4 years. We have posted, information to all sorts of authorities, but honestly, we don't feel that we have been listened to too much. And it seems there's a political direction, and now they suggest a ban. And we'll survive with that. It will be a big problem for Europe in the sense of waste. And if I may add, this is not on a personal note, but I've been in industry for many years, and I've been running cement factories and lake factories where we're using a lot of fossil energy within the glass industry as well. And when I joined Genan, a recycling, green, sustainable company, I thought, well, that's going to be great. Now I'm going to go to the right side of the table, so to speak. But ever since I've been in this industry for the last 7 years, I never, ever spent so much time on defending my product, even though I'm taking care of somebody else's product and trying to make it a recyclable, sustainable, circular economy. It's just very frustrating at the same time as we have politicians always making speeches around the importance of recycling. And this is just another example of it. And all I'm asking is, as a president of MTR, the EuRIC branch of tires, is that they listen to us, more than just having us to say something, but really listen what it is that we're on about. And that's fine. They want to ban it. They claim they solve a problem of 16,000 tons of microplastic. We question that strongly because I think this calculation is done in a not proper way, but that is as it is. They also underestimate the consequences. They say it's 100,000 tons of tires that would be in excess. We say 400 to 500,000 tons, and we're in the middle of the industry. So, end of the day, we're doing something with a good objective for doing it, but I don't think we really serve the cause. I think we can find a lot better solutions to this.
I think part of the problem that we have with almost any environmental issue is the environmentalists have got a very loud voice, and they're very good at complaining, but very poor at providing solutions. And unfortunately, in this CrumbRubber matter, microplastics matter, they have the ear of the politicians, and the politicians are following their lead without listening to the industry, without looking for a proper solution. And as you say, if there's a ban on transport as well, then what are we going to do with these tires? We haven't got the solutions.
No, and it doesn't just appear, because on a global European level, we're talking about around about 3 million tons of tires. And today, as you know as well as I do, around about half of it is being incinerated in Europe. So one half, roughly 1.4 million tons, we're taking care of in the mechanical recycling. And it is better, of course, it's further up the recycling pyramid. But if it had been so easy to find, solutions further up the pyramid, we would have done it already. And that's not going to happen just because they take out a big lunch of it and say, now you cannot use it for this. So it is just that it frustrates me to a certain extent, to be very honest. Also, the amount of time and information we've been giving, and it just seems as if it doesn't change anything. There aren't many people who want to listen. They just come to that conclusion, and we'll survive. Honestly, Gina will survive, Ewan, and the rest of some of the industry will survive. Some will have problems, but some will survive. But for the environment, I just think it's a shame. When you look around in your office where you're sitting now, everything you look at is the future mining industry. And we have to get to terms with, we cannot dig things out to planet Earth anymore. I think everybody agrees on that. But that means that in your room is the mining industry. And if we cannot agree on a regulation or framework in which you can use those products that you recycle, with the disadvantage of having recycled products, because you do not know what the table of content is, because it's recycled, it's a mixture. And if we don't get to that, and if we don't open up for applications where there is a clear assessment of risk and danger, we never get anywhere. We'll just end up having piles of recycled material that we don't know what to do with. And that's what worries me, more than it actually worries me what happens to Genan, because we'll find solution. We might sell less. We'll take care of less tires. Yes, we'll have to. We'll invest less in the industry, which is a shame. But how can we invest heavily into an industry where the goalpost is being moved all the time? I mean, how am I going to persuade my owners or myself to invest in an industry where you feel like politicians are running around trying to make life very difficult for you? And you are actually trying to solve someone else's problem. The problem is that we're driving in cars with tires. And let alone the discussion about where microplastic really comes from, but we'll leave that out because it's not intentional, it's unintentional. So that's fine. We sorted that out. This is
the tire wear issue is a completely different ballgame. And I think even there, the information that we're fed from the environmental lobbyists is perhaps not as clear cut as it ought to be. But that's another story.
Yeah, but the thing is that it's all driven, as I see it, on feelings.
Yeah.
I think the political movement, which I think is good. I mean, I'm really in favor of looking after our environment. I've got kids, but it feels as if that we have a certain movement that we believe that exists a toxic-free world, but it does not exist. And if the driving force of whatever we want to approve or framework we want to make is it has to be toxic free, then we have a problem with all the products we already have produced and still producing. And the recyclers ourselves, we can collect it, we can recycle it, we can make it very nice products. But if we don't find anywhere we can place it in the market again, we have a problem as a society. And that's what worries me more than it actually does Gainan, because we'll get over it. It's after all, it's only Europe. It's only EU. We're selling worldwide. So there are people around the world who has a different view on it that might listen more to the fact of having retention measures and things. But for Europe, I think it's just I think it's a shame, that we don't look more into the. As I said before, we don't suggest to continue as is, because that's wrong. Totally agree on that. But we suggest that we do things that we keep it as a good circular economy, and that we should try to hang on to those, because there aren't that many of them, and we'll have that mining industry around us that we have to take care of. And if we have politicians continuing limiting us recycling things, then we'll end up there will be no recyclers because we will not invest in it.
Yeah, I mean the CrumbRubber issue is this approach that the ECHA RAC has taken is, as we say, it's throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
Because there are solutions. There are technical solutions, there are structural solutions that can prevent the loss from the playing field. But as you say, the whole argument is emotional. And there's a raft of people who look at this not with a scientific, technical point of view, but with an emotional point of view. Tyres contain chemicals, it contain toxins, therefore everything that comes from them must therefore be toxic. And that isn't necessarily the case.
Correct. That's, of course, the other side of the things. It was just to do with the table of content, which I just touched as well. But there's two things of the same kind. It's just that politicians make it extremely difficult to recycle. And we have to stand up to that also on a political level. We cannot have regulations only made to the precautionary principle, because if we apply the precautionary principle only, we will find it extremely difficult to recycle, because we cannot, never mind how much we'd like to, we cannot make a declaration of content in a recycled product, because it is a mixture of recycled things. So never mind if it's plastic, you know that better than I do as well. And tires are 25 different compounds in one tire, and then you've got dozens and hundreds and different producers and tires and types, and that's all a mixture. So if we do not open up that gate, I fear the flexibility of actually doing what we want, namely to use more materials as a recycling our new raw materials that we produce. It's a fact, as you know, that in Europe, it's less than 11% of the products that we are taking in use now that is used, or less than 11% of the content in those products are recycled products. So still 89% or roundabout is virgin product. So we aren't very far down the street yet, and we need to get a long way down that street. And this microplastic thing is just one step in, I think, in the wrong direction, but with the right purpose. The purpose is right. They want to, cut microplastics. I totally agree. But we should look at what sort of solutions we can find and accept certain consequences of what we're having to recycle already made products. And what I miss from the Commission is it a zero solution that is needed, or because it was suggested as 7 grams per square meter, and we have shown in the initial test here that we can get well below that, but all of a sudden that's ignored. So I presume then that if 7 grams per square meter on football pitches is not acceptable, which is less than 50 kilos a pitch per year, then it's very difficult to find applications where you don't have a certain amount of risk or danger and what is in the probability of it. And that's what worries me and frustrates me a little bit, to be very honest.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. mean, I can see, as an onlooker, I can see an argument for restrictions in microplastics, but at the same time, I'm not seeing any solutions coming from government or the
No.
Commission about how we deal with the problem. And that has to be frustrating for anybody in the industry. Because as you say, the percentage of materials or recyclates coming back into new products, such as tyres and conveyor belts, is very low. And it will take a long time before the tyre manufacturers, the rubber industry, come around to the idea of using, for argument's sake, devulcanized rubber. I just had a discussion this morning with a devulcanizer in India about just this exact problem, persuading the market that there was an alternative use, alternative avenues, and that they didn't have to use natural rubber all the time. But again, that's another story.
Yeah, but it's a relevant one. And of course, that the people who are banning everything they're banning now would be looking at chemical recycling and all sorts. But that's also very long down the road, and there's a lot of disadvantages in that. You can say, well, how much recycling is really chemical recycling? Is it part of it? At least there's incineration to a certain extent. So it's political what you want. But what I just feel in the microplastics, if we should go back to the main subject, is that they claim that, I say they, I mean the Commission is stating that we are talking about intentionally added microplastic of a total of 42,000 tons a year. And now they have, just by the flip of the fingers, they've sold 16,000 tons by banning microplastics on football pitches, which is heavily overestimated. I mean, seriously, heavily overestimated. At the same time as they claim that the consequences of doing this will only affect 100,000 tons of tires. Now, if you take those two things and combine them, consequences relatively small, fantastic effect on preventing microplastics, then it's easier to argue for it. But it's not been listened to all arguments on the figures that we have presented to, it seems as if all those facts have been ignored. And that worries me, that we then sort of make the decisions on the wrong facts, which should not be the case. We should at least be able to agreeing on certain magnitudes of what we're looking at. But it doesn't seem to be the case.
So how does the industry get the right facts in front of the Commission?
We've been answering all these, the questioning times where along the last 3 or 4 years, and we presented the figures based on number of pitches, the knowledge of how many pitches, how many we have got with retention measures now. We have been, you mentioned in the beginning the thing about the 2.5 tons, where we had studies made where it claimed, which clearly show that 75% is compaction on the pitch itself, and they have taken that into consideration. But they're still talking about 500 kilos or half a ton, a pitch every year that goes straight into the environment. And we have studies showing that that is not the case. It's overestimated. But it hasn't been changed one comma or anything. It's just simply roll on with the same figure, which we find a little bit disturbing. At the same time as they then ignore the fact that the industry is supplying more than 100,000 tons of tires into this application. So those two things combined makes just the wrong basis of the conclusions. And as I say, we've supplied all those data, both to RAC and ECHA and the whole lot, but it hasn't been taken on, it seems, and that frustrates me. Cost a lot of money, a lot of waste of time, basically.
But why would the ECHA not take on board information and data from the industry?
I don't know. I can just say that that's the case. So, I don't know the sources they have. I don't know what counter information they have. You're not in a position where you can go and talk to the commission about, why have you done as you've done. It's on the RAC. You are not allowed to talk to anybody. You're not talked about anybody in the ECHA committee. So you just supply information. They digest it and they make proposals. And then went to the commission. You ask certain things, you supply information, and then they make a proposal. And that's the proposal we have now that is now being analyzed in country states on the member states. And we're trying there to start to talk to people with eyes and ears. And you look at somebody and say, these are the facts, But of course, we're far down the process now, which makes it harder to get the people then to listen to our suggestion, which frankly to you, what we are looking at is that why not then put these retention measures in quickly so we get an effect on the environment, and then extend the period before you ban it, and then take that period as an assessment period where you look at, is it really true that we can bring it down to this level? Is it then not really better to have that recycling circle to continue than it is to ban it? But of course, and that's what we can't get an answer to, what is the limit? It was 7 grams, apparently it's 0. So if it's 0, we can't recycle it, mates. So what to do with it? Should we then incinerate it, or should we export it to third world so that it disappears out of our eyes and everybody's happy until we get the waste shipment regulations in place, and then we got another problem. So that's what I'm trying to shout for, basically. More than it's me, Genan, it will be difficult for us. Of course, it will affect us, but it will never. I mean, the energy problem we have now is probably more major than this would be. That if the politician could do something about that, that will help more than. But we don't expect any help there either. Doesn't seem as if, at least, not in Denmark, at least.
No, not anywhere. Not anywhere.
Yeah, it seems as if in Germany they're looking at something that we hope can put some sort of a, cap on the energy prices, because it's of course difficult to maneuvering in, but we'll see. It's a different matter.
Yeah, I noticed when I was in Germany the other week that all the public buildings that normally are lit up are in darkness.
Yeah.
So,
it's also pretty cold in our office, so we brought it down to 19 degrees Celsius, because that's what they're going to do in publics. So we're doing the same in the office here. Put on a sweater. I've got a sweater on, so we'll make our little contribution to the energy consumption in Europe.
So there you have it. That was our interview. That was our interview with Poul Steen Rasmussen. Ewan, when we recorded that interview yesterday, it was very, very apparent to me the frustration. There was a keen sense of frustration in what Poul was saying, and there was clear to me that I think he felt that the proposals and the arguments they have put forward and solutions just haven't really been listened to, or maybe even haven't even been wanted to be listened to. What's your take on the interview, what he had to say, and the situation going forward?
Absolutely, there was certainly an element of frustration, and Paul was quite clear about that. The industry has been sending evidence to the ECHA for years now. They, in a way, the industry has been sort of hoisted by its own petard, because they talked about having to replace 2.5-3 tons of crumb rubber per field per year. So if you take all the artificial fields in Europe and you multiply that by, let's say, 3 tons, you're looking at a vast volume of crumb rubber ending up in the environment somewhere. The reality is that in a controlled scenario, where the fields are properly drained, there are entrance and exit points and showers, filters, and the crumb rubber that does come off the field is contained, then we find that the actual lost from the field is as little as 2.5 to 3.5 kilograms per year, which is negligible. It's a set of tires in a car or a truck would put more tire wear particles into the atmosphere than a football pitch. But so we have the technology in the industry to limit the losses to the environment, but the ECHA, RAC are putting in place what appears to be a zero tolerance approach, where you don't have anything get into the environment, which is going to create a massive problem. And if on top of that you dial in the transport laws that are coming in, the waste transport laws that are coming in according to Paul, we then have a scenario where we can't export. Now that will come as a big shock to people in some markets. If we can't export waste from Europe, what do we do with it? It's an extra 400,000 tons of tires per year. Yeah, an extra 400,000 tons of tires per year that we need to find an outlet for. For the past 30 years, as long as I've been following the industry, no government in Europe has shown any interest in developing the industry or protecting it or investing in it. So we're facing a scenario where, in order to resolve one issue, which is a bit of a non-issue according to the CrumbRubber industry, we end up with a far bigger issue, one that we thought we'd addressed, of tyre stockpiles. You can't just burn them, you can't de-vulcanize them, you can't pyrolyze them. All the markets just aren't there. So it's been interesting, and I think we can all share Paul's frustration with the situation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's funny, like this proposed ban. It's almost like we've come a long way in creating like a market which enhances the circularity of the economy and using these resources better, instead of just dumping them somewhere or burying them in the ground. We've come a long way to making. Still got a long way to go, but we've come a long way in using those resources. It feels like such a big step back. And we look at how these the biggest one I always think is like playground and sports pitches. They're so widely used, these applications of CrumbRubber. It just feel I don't have the knowledge or experience that you have or Paul has, but it feels like on the face of it such a big step backwards in terms of a solution.
Yeah, it's the law of unintended consequences. And it's, as Paul referred to, it's very emotional. If you have a lobby group that says CrumbRubber is going to damage the environment, it's going to damage your children's future, the argument becomes emotional rather than scientific, rather than technical. And when you look at the technical details that are available, the odds, they just don't stack up to requiring a ban. There are other issues with CrumbRubber. I don't deny that. Possibly in a future issue, we may look at what those other issues are. But for the moment, the argument is about an industry that is about to be potentially wiped out by legislation that is unnecessary. It's a hammer to crack a nut. It's an emotional argument, and it has huge unintended consequences that nobody has any answer for. And I get wound up and I'm a bit of an environmentalist, but I think I'm a realistic one. And I get wound up by environmentalists who always got the problem, and we must stop using fossil fuels. We must stop doing this. We must stop doing that. And you ask them, what are your alternatives?
Yeah.
And they never have any.
Yeah, no, it's true. I think it needs to be much more of a two-way conversation about this. And we are talking about an industry here and a business model that at its core is trying to solve a waste issue and trying to create that and trying to create further value. So the people involved in this industry are fully aware of the environmental arguments of the product they're trying to do. So they're not, people like Paul said in his interview, how much he cares about the environment and wanted to protect that for his family and future generations himself. So people working in the industry understand this argument. So why not have a proper conversation and come up with a better solution?
Absolutely. I think the feeling that I'm getting from the industry is one of frustration or despair. I've seen it from others, and here we have it in the video, an open admission that the industry is frustrated with the ECHA RAC decisions.
Definitely. Obviously, this is a big topic, and it's going to be one that sort of runs for a while. I know Paul said that the ban would come into action within 8 years, but it's going to be something over the next few months that will continue to attract a lot of attention. So obviously, we have another episode planned on the same topic. Could you just give a little lead in for people so that they know what they can expect in our next
Yeah, of course. Our next podcast, which will follow very shortly, is with Dr. Tyre Rasmussen, who's the president of the European Tyre Recycling Association. Tyre has been an enthusiastic supporter of recycling for, again, as long as I can remember. He's always been there. He is a genuine person, and we're going to speak to Tyre in the next podcast and get his viewpoint, the viewpoint from ECHA. So that will be interesting.
Absolutely. Okay, well, thank you for conducting that interview, Ewan. We'll be back very shortly with another episode of the Tyre Recycling Podcast. Until then, please stay safe and thank you for watching.